In the shadows of the Harland cotton plantation, Sadie Williams guards a dangerous secret, her hidden baby boy, Isaac. When Elias Harland, the owner's compassionate son, discovers them, he makes a life-changing choice to help protect them. As their feelings deepen, they embark on a perilous journey to freedom via the Underground Railroad, pursued relentlessly by Elias's father, who will stop at nothing to reclaim what he considers his property. Before we start this story, comment below from where you are watching us. The Harland cotton plantation stretched as far as the eye could see under the hot Alabama sun. The big white house stood at the top of a hill, overlooking acres of cotton fields where slaves worked from sunrise to sunset. Behind the main house, tucked away from view, stood the slave quarters, simple wooden cabins where exhaustion and despair filled the air as thickly as the summer heat. Sadie Williams kept her head down as she scrubbed the floorboards of the main house. At 24, she'd learned that being invisible was the safest way to survive. She was different from the other slaves, quieter, more watchful. Her dark eyes missed nothing and her slim fingers worked quickly at whatever task was assigned to her. She had a secret that would get her killed if anyone found out. Every night, when the plantation fell silent and darkness blanketed the land, Sadie would slip out of the cramped quarters she shared with 3 other women. She'd make her way silently to the old barn at the edge of the property, her heart pounding with each step. There, nestled in a makeshift bed of hay and torn cloth, was her baby boy, Isaac. No one knew about him. No one could know. On this particular night, as Sadie entered the barn, the smell of hay and animals greeted her. She moved quickly to the corner, where a small lantern cast just enough light for her to see. Isaac lay there, bundled in the cleanest rags she could find, his tiny fists clenched as he slept. "I'm here, little one," she whispered, lifting him into her arms. The baby stirred, his eyes opening to look at her. Sadie settled onto a hay bale and unbuttoned her dress to feed him. The barn was quiet except for the occasional rustle of animals and the soft sounds of the baby nursing. "You're growing so fast," she murmured, stroking his cheek. "Soon you'll be too big to hide." The thought sent a wave of fear through her. What would happen when she couldn't keep him secret anymore? The master would sell him, or worse. She couldn't bear the thought. The sound of footsteps outside made her freeze. Quickly, she covered herself and held Isaac closer, ready to run if needed. The barn door creaked open. Elias Harland stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the moonlight. At 26, he was nothing like his father. Where the elder Harland was harsh and cruel, Elias had always shown a quieter nature. He sometimes rode alongside the workers in the fields, spoke to them with respect, and once even shared his water with an elderly slave who had collapsed from the heat. But he was still the master's son. "Who's there?" he called out, lifting a lantern. Sadie couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. She pulled Isaac closer, tears filling her eyes as she braced herself for whatever punishment would come. The light from Elias's lantern fell on her face, then moved down to the bundle in her arms. His eyes widened. "Sadie," he said, stepping closer. "What are you doing out here?" She couldn't speak. The fear had locked her throat. Elias moved closer until he stood right in front of her. His eyes were fixed on the baby. "Whose child is that?" he asked, his voice surprisingly gentle. Sadie still couldn't answer. She just held Isaac tighter, as if that could somehow protect him. To her shock, Elias knelt down beside her. His face showed no anger, only concern and something else she couldn't name. "How long have you been hiding him here?" he asked. 3 months, sir," Sadie finally managed to say. Elias reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and touched the baby's cheek with one finger. "He's beautiful," he whispered. Then he looked up at Sadie, his blue eyes meeting her brown ones. "He'll be our son now." Sadie couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Sir?" "I'll help you keep him safe," Elias said. "No one needs to know." "Why would you do that?" Sadie asked, suspicion replacing her fear. Nothing in her life had prepared her for kindness from a white man, especially not the plantation owner's son. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "Tihen," he added, "and because I've watched you for a long time, Sadie. You're different. You're strong." She didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called her strong before. "What's his name?" Elias asked. "Isaac," she replied. "His name is Isaac." Elias smiled. "Isaac," he repeated. "A good name." The baby began to fuss, and Sadie rocked him gently. "I should go," Elias said, standing up. "But I'll be back tomorrow night. I'll bring things for the baby, a proper blanket, some milk." Sadie watched him, still not trusting this sudden turn of events. "If your father finds out—" "He won't," Elias said firmly. "I promise you that." After he left, Sadie sat in the darkness, rocking Isaac and wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life by trusting Elias Harland. True to his word, Elias returned the next night, and the night after that. Each time he brought something for Isaac, a soft bialy. Anket, a bottle, small pieces of bread soaked in milk. He never asked who Isaac's real father was. He never asked how long Sadie had been hiding him. All he ever asked was, "Is he warm? Is he safe?" 1 week turned into 2, then 3. Sadie began to look forward to the evenings when Elias would join her in the barn. They would sit together in the soft light of the lantern, watching Isaac sleep or taking turns holding him when he was awake. "My mother died when I was young," Elias told her one night. "I barely remember her, just the sound of her singing to me before bed." "I'm sorry," Sadie said. She had lost her own mother years ago, sold to another plantation when Sadie was just 16. "My father changed after she died," Elias continued. "He was never a kind man, but he became harder, colder. The plantation became everything to him, and I became nothing more than another piece of property to be shaped into his image." Sadie didn't know what to say to that. The idea that the master's son could feel like property was strange to her. "Is that why you're different?" she asked finally. "Why you don't act like your father?" Elias looked at her, his eyes reflecting the lantern light. "I suppose so. I saw what hatred and cruelty did to him. I didn't want to become that." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound coming from Isaac's soft breathing. "Who is his father, Sadie?" Elias finally asked, breaking his own rule. Sadie stiffened. She had known this question would come eventually, but she still wasn't ready to answer it. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to," Elias said quickly. "No," Sadie said. "You should know." She took a deep breath. "Last year, one of the overseers, he found me alone in the storage shed. I tried to fight him off, but..." Her voice trailed off. Elias's face darkened with anger. "Which one?" he demanded. "It doesn't matter," Sadie said. "He's gone now, moved on to another plantation." "It does matter," Elias insisted. "What he did was wrong." "Many things here are wrong," Sadie said quietly, "but that's just the way things are." Elias was silent for a long moment. "It doesn't have to be," he finally said. As summer turned to fall, Isaac grew stronger. He was starting to make more noise, cooing and babbling in a way that both delighted Sadie and terrified her. The louder he became, the harder it would be to keep him hidden. One night, as rain pounded on the barn roof, Isaac wouldn't stop crying. Sadie tried everything, feeding him, changing the rags she used to keep him clean, walking back and forth with him in her arms. Nothing worked. Exhausted from a long day of work and a longer night of worry, Sadie sat down on a hay bale and began to cry herself. That was how Elias found her when he arrived, soaked from the rain. "What's wrong?" he asked, rushing to her side. "He won't stop crying," Sadie sobbed. "Someone's going to hear him. They'll find him." Elias looked at the screaming baby, then at Sadie's tear-streaked face. Without a word, he reached out and took Isaac from her arms. "Let me try," he said. To Sadie's surprise, he began to sing softly, a lullaby she'd never heard before. His voice was deep and soothing, and gradually, Isaac's cries subsided. The baby looked up at Elias with wide, curious eyes. "That's it, little one," Elias murmured. "You're all right now." Sadie watched them, her heart filling with an emotion she couldn't name. It wasn't until that moment that she truly understood. Elias's kindness wasn't born of pity or guilt. It was love. As the weeks passed, Sadie and Elias grew closer. The hours they spent in the barn with Isaac became precious to both of them. They talked about their lives, their dreams, their fears. Sadie told him about her childhood, about being torn from her family when she was sold to the Harland plantation. Elias shared his own loneliness, the weight of his father's expectations, the disgust he felt at the plantation's cruel practices. "I'm trapped here as surely as you are," he said one night, "just in a different way." "But you could leave," Sadie pointed out. "You could go anywhere." "And do what?" Elias asked. "This is all I've ever known, and besides, I couldn't leave you and Isaac." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sadie looked away, afraid of what might show on her face. "We could all leave," Elias said quietly. "Together." Sadie's head snapped up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we could go north," Elias said, his voice gaining excitement. "There are places where you and Isaac would be free, where we could be a family." "A family?" Sadie repeated, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. Elias took her hand. "Yes, Sadie, a family. You, me, and Isaac." The hope that bloomed in her chest was almost painful. "But how? Your father would never allow it." "We won't ask his permission," Elias said firmly. "I have some money saved, enough to get us north to start a new life." Sadie wanted to believe him. She wanted it more than she'd ever wanted anything, but a lifetime of disappointment had taught her to be cautious. "It's not that simple," she said. "People would look for us. For me and Isaac, at least." "I've thought about that," Elias said. "We'd need to be careful, travel at night, avoid towns. But it could be done. People have done it before." Sadie looked down at Isaac, sleeping peacefully in his makeshift crib. A chance at freedom. A chance at a real life for her son. A chance at love. "When?" she asked. Elias smiled, his eyes lighting up. "Soon. I need to gather supplies, make arrangements. 2 weeks, maybe 3. For the first time in her life, Sadie allowed herself to hope. But hope was a dangerous thing on the Harland plantation. The next day, as Sadie was hanging laundry to dry, she saw Margaret Harland, the master's wife, watching her from the porch. There was something calculating in the older woman's gaze that made Sadie's skin crawl. Later, as she cleaned the dining room, she overheard a conversation between Mrs. Harland and her husband. "That girl, Sadie," Mrs. Harland was saying, "she's been acting strange lately." "What do you mean?" Mr. Harland asked, barely looking up from his newspaper. "Sneaking around at night. And yesterday I saw her with something tucked in her apron. Looked like a blanket. A baby's blanket." Mr. Harland lowered his paper, his interest finally caught. "A blanket? Where would she get such a thing?" "That's what I'd like to know," Mrs. Harland said. "And there's something else. Elias has been disappearing in the evenings. No one knows where he goes." "You think there's a connection?" Mr. Harland asked, his voice hardening. "I think it's worth looking into," Mrs. Harland replied. Sadie's heart pounded so loudly she was sure they would hear it. She slipped away as quietly as she could, her mind racing. They were suspicious. It was only a matter of time before they discovered Isaac. That night, when Elias came to the barn, Sadie told him what she'd overheard. "We need to leave now," she urged. "Tonight." Elias ran a hand through his hair, his face troubled. "I'm not ready yet. The supplies, the route." "It doesn't matter," Sadie insisted. "They're going to find Isaac. You know what will happen then." Elias paced back and forth. "You're right," he finally said. "We'll leave tomorrow night. I'll get what I can during the day." "No," Sadie said firmly. "I'm taking Isaac and leaving tonight. You can follow tomorrow if you want." Elias stared at her. "You can't go alone, it's too dangerous." "Staying is more dangerous," Sadie replied. Elias looked like he wanted to argue further, but then he nodded. "All right, but we stick together. I'm coming with you tonight." Relief washed over Sadie. "Thank you," she whispered. "We'll leave at midnight," Elias said. "Pack only what you absolutely need for Isaac. I'll bring food and money." Sadie nodded, her mind already making plans. "I'll be ready." Midnight came, and Sadie waited in the barn with Isaac bundled in her arms. She had nothing to pack. Everything she owned in the world was the clothes on her back and the baby in her arms. But Elias didn't come. 1 hour passed, then another. Sadie paced the barn, anxiety gnawing at her. Had he changed his mind? Had something happened to him? Just as she was about to give up and leave on her own, the barn door creaked open. Sadie spun around, relief flooding her, but it wasn't Elias who stood in the doorway. It was Mr. Harland, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him stood two overseers holding lanterns. "Well, well," Mr. Harland said, his voice like ice. "What do we have here?" Sadie clutched Isaac tighter, backing away until she hit the wall. "A baby," Mr. Harland continued, stepping closer. "Hidden away in my barn, on my property." He looked down at Isaac, then back at Sadie. "And where, I wonder, is my son? He was seen heading this way earlier." "I don't know, sir," Sadie managed to say. Mr. Harland's hand shot out, grabbing her by the arm. "Don't lie to me, girl. I know he's been meeting you here. What have you done to him?" "Nothing," Sadie gasped. "I haven't done anything." Mr. Harland's grip tightened painfully. "Take the baby," he ordered one of the overseers. "No!" Sadie cried, trying to pull away. "Please, no!" But the overseer wrenched Isaac from her arms. The baby began to wail, his cries piercing the night. "Lock her in the shed," Mr. Harland commanded. "I'll deal with her in the morning." "And the baby, sir?" the overseer asked. Mr. Harland looked at the crying infant with disgust. "Take it to the house. My wife will decide what to do with it." As the overseers dragged her away, Sadie fought with all her strength, screaming for her son. But it was no use. Isaac's cries grew fainter as the distance between them increased until she couldn't hear him at all. Thrown into the storage shed, Sadie collapsed onto the dirt floor, her body shaking with sobs. Where was Elias? Had he been caught too? And what would happen to Isaac? In the darkness of the shed, with the taste of despair bitter in her mouth, Sadie made a decision. Whatever happened tomorrow, she would find a way to get her son back, and then they would run, as far and as fast as they could, even if she had to do it alone. The night in the storage shed was the longest of Sadie's life. The darkness pressed in around her as she huddled on the dirt floor, her arms aching for the weight of her son. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Isaac's face as he was torn away from her. She heard his cries echoing in her mind. Where was Elias? Had he abandoned them, or had something happened to him? As the first light of dawn filtered through the cracks in the wooden walls, Sadie heard footsteps approaching. She scrambled to her feet, wiping the tears from her face. Whatever was coming, she would face it with dignity. The door swung open, and Mr. Harland stood there, his face like stone. Behind him was Mrs. Harland, her thin lips pressed into a disapproving line. "Where is my son?" Mr. Harland demanded without preamble. "I don't know, sir," Sadie answered truthfully. Mr. Harland stepped into the shed, towering over her. "Don't play games with me, girl. Elias is missing. His bed wasn't slept in last night. You were the last person seen with him." "I haven't seen Master Elias since yesterday afternoon," Sadie lied, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Liar!" Mr. Harland's hand shot out, striking her across the face. Sadie stumbled back, tasting blood. "The baby," Mrs. Harland spoke up, her voice cold. "Where did it come from?" Sadie remained silent, her cheek burning from the blow. "Answer my wife," Mr. Harland ordered. "He's mine," Sadie said softly. "We can see that," Mrs. Harland snapped. "Who is the father?" Sadie looked down at the ground. "One of the field workers, ma'am. He was sold away last year." Mrs. Harland made a disgusted noise. "How long have you been hiding it in our barn?" 3 months, ma'am. "And my son?" Mr. Harland cut in. "What does Elias have to do with this?" Sadie's mind raced. If they knew about Elias's plans to run away with her and Isaac, it would only make things worse. "Nothing, sir," she said. "I don't know where Master Elias is." Mr. Harland studied her face, his eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. In the meantime, you'll be punished for your deception. 20 lashes. Sadie felt the blood drain from her face. 20 lashes could kill a person. "And the baby?" Mrs. Harland asked her husband. "It'll be sold at the next auction," Mr. Harland replied dismissively. "No use keeping another mouth to feed if it can't work yet." "No," The word tore from Sadie's throat before she could stop it. "Please, sir, don't sell my baby. I'll work harder. I'll do anything." "You have no say in this," Mr. Harland said coldly. "The baby is property, just like you." Sadie fell to her knees, something she had never done before any white person. "Please," she begged. "He's just a baby. He needs his mother." Mrs. Harland looked down at her with contempt. "You should have thought of that before you hid him from us. Take her away," she instructed the overseer who had been waiting outside. As Sadie was dragged out of the shed, she caught a glimpse of the main house. Somewhere inside was her son, and she had no idea if she would ever see him again. The punishment was as brutal as Sadie had feared. Tied to a post in the yard, her dress torn open at the back, she endured each lash with as much strength as she could muster. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of hearing her scream. By the 10th lash, her vision had blurred. By the 15th, she was barely conscious. When the 20th finally fell, she slumped against the post, held up only by the ropes that bound to her wrists. She was cut down and carried back to the slave quarters, where the other women did what they could for her wounds. Through the haze of pain, Sadie had only one thought: Isaac. She had to find a way to get to Isaac. 3 days passed before she could stand without help. Her back was a mass of raw, painful welts, but she forced herself to move, to work. If she showed weakness, they might decide she wasn't worth keeping. And then she would be so elled away from her son. A week after her punishment, as Sadie was scrubbing the kitchen floor, she overheard Mrs. Harland talking to the cook. "That baby cries all night long," Mrs. Harland complained. "None of the house slaves can quiet him. It's driving me to distraction." "Babies need their mothers, ma'am," the cook said cautiously. "Well, this one will have to learn to do without," Mrs. Harland snapped. "Mr. Harland has already written to the slave trader. He'll be here next week for the auction." Sadie's hands stilled on the floor. 1 week. She had 1 week to find a way to save Isaac. That night, as she lay on her stomach in the cramped cabin, unable to sleep because of the pain in her back, Sadie heard a soft tapping at the window. She froze, listening. The tap came again. Carefully, mindful of her wounds, she got up and moved to the window. A figure stood outside in the darkness. Her heart leaped. "Elias?" she whispered. "It's me," came the hushed reply. "Can you come out?" Sadie glanced at the other women sleeping in the cabin. None of them stirred. She slipped out the door as quietly as she could. Elias stood waiting, his face half hidden in shadow. When he saw her, he rushed forward, taking her hands in his. "Sadie, thank God," he breathed. "Are you all right? They said you were punished." "I'm alive," Sadie said simply. "Where were you? That night you never came." Elias's face twisted with guilt and anger. "My father locked me in my room. One of the house slaves warned him that I was planning something. By the time I got out, you had already been caught." "They took Isaac," Sadie said, her voice breaking. "They're going to sell him next week." "I know," Elias said grimly. "That's why I'm here. We're still leaving, Sadie. All of us. Tonight." Hope flared in Sadie's chest, quickly followed by doubt. "How? They're watching me now, and Isaac is in the house." "I have a plan," Elias said. "My father and the overseers will be busy tonight. There's a problem at the north field. The irrigation ditch broke and flooded part of the crop. They'll be working to fix it until dawn." He squeezed her hands. "This is our chance. Our only chance." Sadie wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. "How will we get Isaac?" "He's in the nursery at the back of the house," Elias explained. "I can get him out through the window. But we need to be quick. Meet me at the edge of the woods in 1 hour." "I'll be there," Sadie promised. Elias hesitated, then pulled her close, careful of her injured back. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you," he whispered against her hair. "I should have been there. You're here now," Sadie said. "That's what matters." He pulled back, looking into her eyes. 1 hour, he repeated. "Don't barring anything. We need to travel light and fast." Sadie nodded, and then Elias was gone, melting into the darkness. For a moment she stood there, her heart pounding. This was really happening. They were going to escape. She was going to get her son back unless it was a trap. The thought came unbidden, chilling her blood. What if Elias was working with his father? What if this was a test of her loyalty? But deep down, Sadie knew better. She had seen the TR youth in Elias's eyes when he looked at Isaac, when he looked at her. This was no trap. This was their chance at freedom. An hour later, Sadie waited at the edge of the woods, every nerve in her body tense. The night was cloudy, the moon mostly hidden, which was good for their escape but made it harder to see. Every sound made her jump, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the wind. What if Elias couldn't get Isaac out? What if they were caught? A figure emerged from the darkness, moving quickly toward her. Elias, with a bundle in his arms. Sadie ran to meet him, her heart in her throat. "I've got him," Elias said, his voice breathless with excitement. "He's asleep." Sadie reached for her son, tears of relief streaming down her face as she took him into her arms. Isaac stirred but didn't wake, his tiny face peaceful in sleep. "We need to go," Elias urged. "I don't know how long it will be before someone checks the nursery." He led the way into the woods, following a path only he seemed able to see. Sadie stayed close behind him, cradling Isaac against her chest. The pain in her back was almost unbearable, but she ignored it. Nothing mattered now except getting as far away from the Harland plantation as possible. They walked for what felt like hours, the woods growing thicker around them. Sadie's legs ached, and her wounded back screamed with Eve. Tri-step, but she pushed on. Freedom was ahead. A life with her son, a life with Elias. "There's a road up ahead," Elias whispered over his shoulder. "I have a friend waiting with a wagon. He'll take us to the next town, where we can catch a train north." "A friend?" Sadie asked, suspicious again. "Who?" "Jacob Miller," Elias replied. "He runs the general store in town. He's been helping slaves escape for years." Sadie had heard whispers about people like T-Hat, white folks who risked everything to help slaves reach freedom. She'd never quite believed they existed. They reached the edge of the woods and Elias stopped, holding up a hand for her to do the same. Ahead, Sadie could make out the outline of a wagon on the road, a single lantern hanging from its side. "Wait here," Elias instructed. "Let me make sure it's Jacob." Sadie nodded, holding Isaac closer as Elias slipped out of the woods and approached the wagon. She watched as he exchanged words with the driver, too far away for her to hear what was said. After a moment, Elias turned and beckoned to her. "It's safe," he called softly. Sadie stepped out of the woods, her legs trembling with exhaustion and fear. As she neared the wagon, she could see the driver more clearly, an older white man with a kind face and worried eyes. "This is Sadie and Isaac," Elias told him. "Sadie, this is Jacob Miller." "We need to hurry," Jacob said, his voice low and urgent. "There are patrols out tonight." Elias helped Sadie climb into the back of the wagon, where blankets had been laid out. She settled down with Isaac, who was beginning to stir. "He'll be hungry soon," she murmured. "There's food in that basket," Jacob said, pointing. "And water. It's a long journey to the next stop." Elias climbed in beside her, and Jacob flicked the reins, setting the horses in motion. The wagon jerked forward, and Sadie bit back a cry as the movement sent pain shooting through her injured back. "Are you all right?" Elias asked, noticing her grimace. "I'll be fine," Sadie assured him, though she wasn't sure if that was true. The beating had been severe, and she hadn't had time to heal properly. "Let me see," Elias insisted, moving behind her. "No," Sadie protested, "it's not important now." But Elias was already gently pulling aside the torn fabric of her dress. She heard his sharp intake of breath. "My God, Sadie," he whispered. "What did they do to you?" 20 lashes, she said simply, "for hiding Isaac." Elias's hand hovered over her back, not quite touching the raw wounds. "This needs to be treated," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Jacob, do you have any medical supplies?" "In the box under the seat," Jacob replied, not taking his eyes off the road. Elias retrieved the box and set about cleaning Sadie's wounds as gently as he could. Each touch was agony, but Sadie endured it silently, focusing instead on Isaac, who was now awake and beginning to fuss. "I need to feed him," she said. Elias finished bandaging her back and moved to sit beside her. "Go ahead," he said. "I'll keep watch." As Sadie nursed Isaac, Elias kept his eyes on the road behind them, alert for any sign of pursuit. Jacob drove the horses at a steady pace, fast enough to put distance between them and the plantation, but not so fast as to attract attention. "Where are we going?" Sadie asked after a while. "North," Elias replied. "To Ohio first, then maybe further. There are people who will help us along the way, stations on what they call the Underground Railroad." "And when we get there," Sadie pressed, "what then?" Elias looked at her, his face serious in the dim light. "Then we start a new life, together, as a family." Sadie wanted to believe it could be that simple, but nothing in her life had ever been simple. "Your father will look for you," she pointed out, "and for us." "Let him look," Elias said firmly. "We'll be long gone, and we'll have new names, new identities." "What about money? How will we live?" "I've been saving for years," Elias told her, "and I have skills. I can work as a carpenter, a blacksmith. I learned alongside the slaves on the plantation, remember?" Sadie did remember. Elias had always been curious about how things were made, how they worked. While other plantation owners' sons spent their days hunting or gambling or drinking, Elias had often been found in the workshops, learning from the skilled slaves. "And what about me?" Sadie asked. "What will I do?" "Whatever you want to do," Elias said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You could learn to read, to write. You could have a shop of your own someday." The idea was so foreign, so impossible, that Sadie almost laughed. "A slave with a shop?" "Not a slave," Elias corrected gently. "A free woman, a mother. My wife, if you'll have me." Sadie stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "Your wife, that's not possible." "It is where we're going," Elias insisted. "There are places where people like us, a white man and a black woman, can live together openly. Not everywhere, I'll admit, but they exist." Before Sadie could respond, Jacob called back to them from the driver's seat. "Someone's coming," he warned. "Get down and be quiet." Elias quickly pulled a tarp over them, and Sadie curled around Isaac, her hand covering his mouth to keep him silent. Through a small gap in the tarp, she could see the road ahead illuminated by the wagon's lantern. Moments later, the sound of hoofbeats reached them, growing louder as riders approached from the opposite direction. Jacob slowed the wagon to a stop as 3 men on horseback came into view. "Evening, gentlemen," Jacob called out, his voice perfectly casual. "Fine night for a ride." "Patrol," one of the men replied. "Looking for runaways. Slave girl and her baby. Might be with a white man, the plantation owner's son." Sadie's blood ran cold. They were already being hunted. "Haven't seen anyone like that," Jacob said. "Just making a delivery to the Johnson farm. Got supplies they needed urgently." "Mind if we take a look in your wagon?" the patrol leader asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Help yourself," Jacob said amiably, "though I'd appreciate if you don't disturb the goods too much. Mrs. Johnson is particular about her flour not getting damp." Sadie held her breath as one of the men dismounted and approached the wagon. She could hear him walking around it, his boots crunching on the gravel. Beside her, Elias tensed, his hand moving to something in his belt. A knife, Sadie realized. The man climbed onto the back of the wagon. Through the gap in the tarp, Sadie could see his boots just inches from her face. He poked at some of the crates and sacks, then lifted the edge of the tarp. Sadie closed her eyes, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure he must hear it. "Looks clear," the man called to his companions. "Just supplies, like he said." The tarp settled back into place, and the man jumped down from the wagon. "Sorry for the trouble," the patrol leader said to Jacob. "If you do see them, there's a reward. $500 for all 3 brought back alive." "I'll keep an eye out," Jacob promised. "Good night to you." The riders moved on, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. Only when they were completely gone did Jacob signal that it was safe to emerge from hide-in-G. "That was close," he muttered. "Too close. We need to change our route." Sadie uncovered Isaac's mouth, and he immediately began to cry, the sound piercing the quiet night. She rocked him frantically, trying to soothe him. "Shh, little one," she whispered. "We need to be quiet now." "He's probably scared," Elias said, helping Sadie sit up, "and hungry again." "We don't have time to stop," Jacob warned. "Those patrols will be back this way eventually." "Just a few minutes," Elias pleaded. "The baby needs to eat, and Sadie needs rest. Her back—" "5 minutes," Jacob conceded reluctantly. "Then we have to keep moving." As Sadie fed Isaac again, she couldn't shake the fear that had settled in her chest. $500 was a fortune, enough to motivate anyone to turn them in. And her description, along with Elias's and Isaac's, was probably being circulated to every town and plantation in the area. "We'll make it," Elias said softly, as if reading her thoughts. "I promise you, Sadie. We'll make it to freedom." Sadie looked down at her son, then up at the man who had risked everything to help them escape. She wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. "I'm holding you to that promise," she said. They traveled through the night, stopping only when absolutely necessary. Jacob knew the back roads and hidden paths, avoiding the main routes where patrols may be waiting. By dawn, they had covered nearly 30 miles. "We'll rest during the day," Jacob explained, as he guided the wagon into a dense copse of trees, well hidden from the road. "It's safer to travel at night." Exhausted, Sadie could barely keep her eyes open. Her back was on fire, and her arms ached from holding Isaac. As soon as the wagon stopped, she slumped against the side, still cradling her son. "Sleep," Elias urged, taking Isaac from her. "I'll watch over him." Too tired to argue, Sadie let her eyes close. She was asleep almost instantly. When she woke, the sun was high in the sky, filtering through the leaves above. Isaac was sleeping peacefully beside her, wrapped in one of the blankets. Elias sat nearby, keeping watch, while Jacob slept, on the driver's seat. "How long was I asleep?" Sadie asked, her voice rough with exhaustion. "A few hours," Elias replied. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been dragged behind a horse," Sadie admitted, "but better than last night." Elias smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Jacob says we should reach the next station by tomorrow morning, a farm owned by Quakers. They'll hide us for a few days, then help us get further north." Sadie nodded, trying to take in the reality of their situation. They were really doing this, running away, seeking freedom. "Are you afraid?" she asked Elias. He considered the question for a moment. "Yes," he finally said, "but not of what lies ahead. I'm afraid of what would happen if we fail." Sadie understood completely. Failure meant death for her, sale for Isaac, and disgrace for Elias if he wasn't killed alongside her. "We won't fail," she said with more confidence than she felt. "We can't afford to." Elias reached out, taking her hand in his. "No matter what happens, Sadie, I want you to know something. These past few months, with you and Isaac, they've been the most real, the most meaningful of my life." Sadie squeezed his hand. "For me too," she admitted. "I never thought I could trust a white man. Never thought I could—" She trailed off, unsure how to express what she was feeling. "Love one?" Elias finished for he-are. Sadie nodded slowly. "Yes, love one." Elias leaned forward, his face close to hers. "I love you, Sadie. You and Isaac. You're my family now. The only family that matters." He kissed her then, a gentle touch of his lips against hers. Sadie closed her eyes, letting herself believe just for a moment that they might actually have a future together. A shout from the road shattered the moment. "Patrol!" Jacob called, suddenly awake and alert. "Hide, now!" But it was too late. The sound of horses crashing through the underbrush told them they had been found, and this time there would be no easy escape. "Get behind me," Elias ordered, pushing Sadie and Isaac toward the back of the wagon. He pulled a pistol from his belt, something Sadie hadn't realized he was carrying. Jacob grabbed a shotgun from under his seat. "How many?" he asked grimly. "Sounds like 3, maybe 4, Elias replied, his face set with determination. Sadie clutched Isaac to her chest, her heart racing. The baby, sensing her fear, began to whimper. "What are we going to do?" she whispered. Before Elias could answer, 4 men on horseback burst into the clearing. Sadie recognized the patrol leader from the night before. His eyes widened when he saw them. "Well, well," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Looks like we found our runaways. These people are under my protection, J. Acob called out, raising his shotgun. I suggest you turn around and ride away. The patrol leader laughed. You're outnumbered, old man. And that's Elias Harland, son of the richest plantation owner in the county. His father's offering a small fortune for his return. He turned his attention to Elias. Your daddy's mighty upset with you, boy. Running off with slaves? What were you thinking? They're not slaves, Elias said firmly. They're my family. The patrol leader's face twisted with disgust. Family? That's sick, even for a slave lover like you. Last warning, Jacob said, cocking his shotgun. Leave now, and no one gets hurt. The patrol leader drew his pistol. I don't think so. We're taking them back. Dead or alive doesn't much matter to me. Everything happened so fast after that. The patrol leader fired his pistol, the bullet splintering the wood of the wagon inches from Jacob's head. Jacob Fee read back, the blast of the shotgun deafening in the small clearing. One of the riders fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. Elias pushed Sadie down to the floor of the wagon. Stay down, he shouted, then turned and fired his own pistol. Another rider cried out, his horse rearing in panic. The clearing was filled with smoke and the sound of gunfire. Sadie curled around Isaac, trying to shield him with her body. The baby was screaming now, terrified by the noise and chaos. Through the haze, Sadie saw Jacob fall, a red stain spreading across his chest. Elias shouted something she couldn't hear, then fired again. The patrol leader's horse went down, throwing him to the ground. For a moment, there was silence. Then Elias was at her side, his face streaked with smoke and sweat. Are you hurt? He asked frantically, checking her for wounds. No, Sadie gasped. Isaac. Elias looked at the crying baby. He is fine, but we need to go now. Can you drive the wagon? I think so, Sadie said, though she'd never done it before. Good, I'll get Jacob. Elias jumped down from the wagon and ran to where Jacob lay motionless on the ground. He knelt beside the older man, checking for signs of life. After a moment, he looked up at Sadie, his face grim. He shook his head. Jacob was dead. Sadie felt a wave of grief and guilt. This man, this stranger, had died trying to help them. Elias, she cried in warning, as one of the fallen riders struggled to his feet, raising his pistol. Elias spun around, firing his own weapon. The man fell and didn't move again. Checking quickly to make sure the other riders were either unconscious or too injured to follow, Elias ran back to the wagon. He climbed onto the driver's seat and took the reins. I'm sorry about Jacob, Sadie said, moving up beside him with Isaac still clutched to her chest. He knew the risks, Elias said, his voice tight with emotion. He was a good man, one of the best. He flicked the reins, and the horses lurched forward. We need to get far away from here before more patrols come looking. They drove in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Isaac eventually cried himself to sleep, exhausted from the ordeal. Where will we go now? Sadie finally asked. We don't know the way to the next station. J. Acob told me where it is, Elias said. A farm about 20 miles north of here, but we can't take the wagon all the way. It's too recognizable now. Then how will we get there? On foot through the woods, Elias replied grimly. It'll be slower but safer. Sadie looked down at Isaac, then at her own worn-out body. Her back still throbbed from the lashing, and she was exhausted from the journey and the terror of the gunfight. Could she walk 20 miles through unfamiliar woods with a baby in her arms? But what choice did they have? We'll rest first, Elias said, seeing the doubt on her face. Find a safe place to hide the wagon, sleep for a few hours. Then we'll continue tonight under cover of darkness. Sadie nodded, grateful for his understanding. What about Jacob? She asked quietly. We can't just leave him there. No, Elias agreed, his knuckles white on the reins. But we can't go back either. The patrols will be swarming that area soon. He sighed heavily. Jacob would want us to keep going, to get to safety. That's what he died for. Sadie knew he was right, but it didn't ease the ache in her heart. Another person had paid the price for her freedom, for her son's freedom. It's not your fault, Elias said, as if reading her thoughts. None of this is your fault. The blame lies with my father and men like him, with the whole system that treats people like property. But Jacob made his choice, Elias interrupted gently. He believed in what he was doing. He believed that all people deserved to be free, and he was willing to risk his life for that belief. Sadie fell silent, watching the road ahead. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the fields they passed. Soon it would be dark again, another night of running, of hiding, of fear, but also another night closer to freedom. They abandoned the wagon deep in the woods, taking only what they could carry: some food, water, a blanket for Isaac, and the weapons from the patrol. Elias fashioned a sling for Sadie to carry Isaac, leaving her hands free for the difficult journey ahead. As night fell, they set out on foot, following a small stream that Elias said would lead them north. The woods were dense and dark, the ground uneven. Every step was a challenge for Sadie, her back screaming in pain, her legs weak with exhaustion. But she didn't complain. She couldn't, not when Elias was risking everything for her and Isaac. Not when Jacob had given his life. They walked for hours, stopping only when Isaac needed to be fed or when the terrain became too difficult to navigate in the darkness. By midnight, Sadie was stumbling with fatigue. "Let's rest," Elias suggested, leading her to a hollow beneath a large oak tree. "Just for an hour or two." Sadie sank down gratefully, her legs giving way beneath her. Isaac stirred in his sling, but didn't wake. She leaned back against the trunk of the tree, mindful of her injured back. Elias sat beside her, his pistol ready in his hand. "Try to sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." "You need to rest too," Sadie protested weakly. "I will," he promised. "Later." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Sadie. Her mind was too full of the day's events, the escape, the gunfight, Jacob's death. And underneath it all, the fear that they would be caught, that Isaac would be taken from her again, that Elias would be killed. "What are you thinking about?" Elias asked after a while, his voice low in the darkness. "Everything," Sadie admitted. "I'm scared, Elias. What if we don't make it?" "We will," he said with quiet confidence. "How can you be so sure?" Elias was silent for a moment. "Because I have to believe it," he finally said. "Because the alternative is unthinkable." Sadie understood. To doubt was to surrender, and surrender meant death or worse. "Tell me about where we're going," she said, needing to think about something else, something hopeful. "Ohio," Elias said. "It's a free state. There are communities there where people like us can live in peace. There's a town called Oberlin. They even have a college that accepts both men and women, black and white." "A college?" Sadie had heard of such places, but had never imagined she could set foot in one. Could Isaac go there someday? "Yes," Elias said firmly. "He could be anything he wants to be, a doctor, a lawyer, a professor." The idea was almost too much to grasp. A future where her son could be educated, could have a profession, could be treated as a human being with rights and dignity. "And us?" she asked hesitantly. "You and me?" Elias took her hand in the darkness. "I meant what I said before, Sadie. I want us to be a family, a real family. I want to marry you if you'll have me." "But it's not legal," Sadie pointed out. "A white man and a black woman." "Not in the South," Elias acknowledged. "But in some places up north it's different. And even if we can't find somewhere that will recognize our marriage legally, we'll know the truth in our hearts. It was a beautiful dream, too beautiful to seem real. And yet, here they were, running toward it, with everything they had." "Yes," Sadie said softly. "If we make it to freedom, I'll marry you, Elias Harland." Even in the darkness, she could see his smile. He leaned forward and kissed her, a promise sealed under the stars. They continued their journey at first light, moving more slowly now, but with renewed determination. The woods began to thin, giving way to fields and small farms. They had to be more careful, staying hidden during the day and traveling only at night. On the third day after leaving the wagon, as they rested in an abandoned barn, Elias pulled out a worn map he'd been carrying. "We're here," he said, pointing to a spot near the border between two states. The farm we're looking for should be about 5 miles north. We could reach it by nightfall if we're careful. Sadie looked at the map, unable to read the words but understanding the distance. 5 more miles. It seemed both so close and so far. What if they turn us away? She asked, voicing a fear that had been growing since Jacob's death. What if they don't want to risk helping us after what happened? They won't turn us away, Elias assured her. These people are committed to the cause. They believe in freedom for all. Even for a white man who ran away with a slave and her baby? Especially for us, Elias said. We represent everything. They're fighting for the idea that love doesn't see color, that family is about more than blood. Sadie wanted to believe him. She had to believe him. Because the alternative, being caught, being separated from Isaac and Elias, was too terrible to contemplate. They set out again as the sun began to set, moving cautiously through fields of corn tall enough to hide them. Isaac was unusually quiet, as if he too understood the need for stealth. The moon rose, P providing just enough light to see by. According to Elias's map, they needed to find a creek with a distinctive bend, then follow it to a road that would lead them to the farm. There, Elias whispered after an hour of searching. I see the creek. Relief washed over Sadie. They were on the right track, just a few more miles to safety. But as they approached the creek, a sound froze them in place, the baying of hounds in the distance. Slave catchers, Elias said grimly. They're tracking us. Fear clutched at Sadie's heart. What do we do? Elias thought quickly. The water. We need to walk in the creek to throw off the scent. The water was cold even in summer, and deep enough in places to reach Sadie's waist. She held Isaac high against her chest, terrified of dropping him. Keep moving, Elias urged, taking her arm to steady her. The farm can't be far now. They waded through the creek for what felt like hours, the sound of the hounds growing fainter behind them. By the time they climbed out on the other side, they were soaked and shivering. We need to keep going, Elias said, though he looked as exhausted as Sadie felt. We can't risk stopping now. Sadie nodded, too tired to speak. She adjusted Isaac in his sling. The baby was awake now and whimpering softly, and followed Elias through the darkness. The terrain became more difficult, hills and rocks acing the flat farmland. Sadie's legs burned with the effort, and her back, which had begun to heal, was painful again from the strain. Almost there, Elias kept saying, though Sadie wasn't sure if he really knew or was just trying to keep her spirits up. And then, just as the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, they saw it. A farmhouse nestled in a small valley, smoke rising from its chimney. That's it, Elias said, relief evident in his voice. That's the safe house. They stood for a moment, looking down at the farm. It was a simple place, a modest house, a barn, fields of crops surrounding it. But to Sadie, it looked like paradise. Come on, Elias said, taking her hand. We're almost home. They made their way down the hill, staying under the cover of trees as much as possible. As they neared the farmhouse, Elias stopped, suddenly cautious. Wait here, he told Sadie. Let me make sure it's SFA. No, Sadie protested, grabbing his arm. We stay together. Elias hesitated, then nodded. All right, but stay behind me. They approached the farmhouse slowly. The sun was rising now, casting a golden light over the fields. A dog barked somewhere nearby, and Sadie tensed. The front door of the house opened, and a man stepped out onto the porch. He was tall and lean, with a grey beard and kind eyes. He spotted them immediately. Who goes there? He called out, his hand moving to something at his waist. A weapon, Sadie realized. Friends? Elias called back, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. Jacob Miller sent us. The man's posture relaxed slightly at the mention of Jacob's name. Come closer then. They walked up to the porch, Sadie still staying slightly behind Elias. The man looked them over, his gaze lingering on Isaac in his sling. Jacob was supposed to be with you, he said. Elias swallowed hard. Jacob didn't make it. There was a fight with a patrol. He died helping us escape. The man closed his eyes briefly as if in prayer. I'm sorry to hear that. Jacob was a good friend. He opened his eyes again, his expression somber but resolute. My name is Thomas Quinn. This is my farm, and you're welcome here. Relief flooded through Sadie, so intense that her knees nearly buckled. Elias steadied her with a hand on her arm. Thank you, he said to Thomas. I'm Elias Harland. This is Sadie and our son, Isaac. If Thomas was surprised by Elias referring to Isaac as their son, he didn't show it. Come inside, he said, opening the door wider. You look exhausted and the little one must be hungry. The interior of the farmhouse was simple but comfortable. A large kitchen with a wood-burning stove, a sitting room with well-worn furniture, and stairs leading to what Sadie assumed were bedrooms. A woman appeared from another room, wiping, her hands on her apron. She was small and plump, with graying hair and the same kind eyes as her husband. These are the ones Jacob was bringing? She asked Thomas. Yes, but Jacob didn't make it, Thomas replied quietly. The woman's face fell. Oh, Lord, have mercy. She crossed herself, then seemed to gather her strength. Well, you poor things must be starving. Sit down, sit down. I'll get you something to eat. Sadie sank gratefully onto a chair at the kitchen table, her legs finally giving out. Isaac began to cry in earnest now, the strange surroundings and people overwhelming him after the long journey. May I? The woman asked, holding out her arms for the baby. Sadie hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. It's all right, Elias assured her. We're safe here. Reluctantly, Sadie handed Isaac to the woman, who took him with practiced ease. What a handsome little man, she cooed, rocking him genteelly. My name is Martha, little one, and you're going to be just fine now. Thomas sat down across from Elias. Tell me what happened, he said. How did Jacob die? As Elias recounted the events of the past few days, the escape from the plantation, the confrontation with the patrol, Jacob's death, their journey through the woods, Sadie felt herself drifting. The warmth of the kitchen, the smell of food cooking on the stove, the sound of Martha singing softly to Isaac. It all combined to create a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. You can rest here for a few days, Thomas was saying when Sadie focused again. But it's not safe to stay too long. Word will spread about Jacob's death and the patrols will be looking everywhere for you. We understand, Elias said. We just need a little time to recover our strength. Then we'll continue north. I have contacts in Cleveland, Thomas told him. They can help you get settled there. It's a good city for people in your situation. By situation, Sadie knew he meant a white man, a black woman, and their child. An unusual family in any part of the country, but especially dangerous in the South. Thank you, Elias said simply. Martha returned with Isaac, who had calmed down and was looking around with curious eyes. This little one is ready for his mama, she said, handing him back to Sadie. And I've prepared a room for you upstairs. You both look like you could use some real sleep. That's very kind, Sadie said, finding her voice at last. Thank you for taking us in. It's what we do, Martha replied with a warm smile. Now come along. Food can wait until you've rested. She led them upstairs to a small but clean bedroom with a single bed. Under normal circumstances, Sadie might have been embarrassed to share a room with Elias in a stranger's home. But these were not normal circumstances, and she was too exhausted to care about propriety. There's water in the basin if you want to wash, Martha told them, and I'll bring up some fresh clothes. Those you're wearing are beyond saving, I'm afraid. When she had gone, Sadie sat on the edge of the bed, still holding Isaac. We made it, she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. To the first stop, Elias corrected gently, sitting beside her. We still have a long way to go. I know, but we're alive. We're together. She looked down at Isaac, who was falling asleep in her arms. He's safe. Elias put his arm around her shoulders, careful of her injured back. Yes, he is, and he'll stay that way. I promise you that, Sadie. No matter what happens, I'll keep you both safe. For the first time since they'd fled the plantation, Sadie allowed herself to truly believe it might be possible, that they might actually reach freedom, might actually have a life together. I love you, she said, the words still new and strange on her tongue. Elias kissed her forehead. "I love you too, both of you. Now get some sleep, we all need it." Sadie lay down on the bed. Isaac nestled beside her. Elias stretched out on the other side, his arm protectively around them both. Within moments she was asleep, her dreams for once not filled with fear, but with hope. They stayed at T. the Quinn farm for 3 days, regaining their strength and planning the next stage of their journey. Thomas provided them with maps, money, and names of people who would help them along the way. Martha saw to it that they had proper clothes, food for the journey, and a special sling that would make it easier for Sadie to carry Isaac. On the evening of the 3rd day, as they sat around the kitchen table after dinner, Thomas brought out a bottle of whisk wine. "A toast," he said, pouring small glasses for himself, Elias, and Sadie, "to Jacob Miller, a brave man who gave his life for freedom." "To Jacob," they echoed, raising their glasses. "And to you 3, Thomas added, "may you find the peace and safety you seek." Sadie sipped the whiskey, the burn in her throat matching the emotion she felt. These strangers had taken them in, cared for them, treated them like family. It was a kindness she had never expected to find in this world. "We leave at dawn tomorrow," Thomas told them after they had finished their drinks. "I'll take you as far as the next station, about 30 miles north. From there, you'll travel with another guide." "How many more stops before we reach Ohio?" Elias asked. 3, maybe 4, Thomas replied. "It depends on the patrols, the weather, how fast you can travel. But with luck, you could be in Cleveland within 2 weeks. 2 more weeks of hiding, of running, of fear. But then freedom, a chance at a real life." "There's something else," Thomas said, his expression growing serious. "Word has reached us about your father, Elias. He's offering $10,000 for your return, and $5,000 for Sadie and the baby." Sadie gasped. It was an enormous sum, more money than most people would see in a lifetime. "That's going to make our journey more dangerous," Elias said grimly. "Every Buentui hunter in the country will be looking for us." "Yes," Thomas agreed, "but it also tells me something important about your father." "What's that?" "He's desperate, and desperate men make mistakes." Elias considered this. "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that might work in our favor," Thomas said. "I've received word that he's focusing his search south of here, thinking you might have headed for New Orleans or even Mexico. He doesn't know about the Underground Railroad, doesn't believe you'd go north." "That gives us an advantage," Elias said, hope creeping into his voice. "For now," Thomas cautioned. "But we can't count on his ignorance forever. The sooner we get you to Ohio, the better." After Thomas and Martha had gone to bed, Sadie and Elias sat on the porch, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Isaac was asleep inside, safe in the cradle Martha had found for him. "Are you afraid?" Sadie scared Elias, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Yes," he admitted, "but not for myself, for you and Isaac." "I'm afraid too," Sadie said, "but not like before. Before I was afraid of living. Now I'm just afraid of not being able to live freely." Elias took her hand. "That's a big difference." "Yes," Sadie agreed. "It is." They sat in silence again, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, an owl hooting in the distance, the rustle of eaves in the gentle breeze. "When we get to Ohio," Elias said after a while, "I want to build you a house. Nothing fancy, just somewhere safe and warm. Somewhere Isaac can grow up without fear." Sadie smiled at the thought. "I'd like that." "And I want to marry you," Elias continued. "Properly, in a church if we can find one that will have us. If not, then in our own way." "I'd like that too," Sadie said, squeezing his hand. "And I want to learn a trade," Elias went on, warming to his vision of their future. "Carpentry, maybe, or blacksmithing, something useful." "And I want to learn to read," Sadie said, voicing a dream she'd held secret for years. "And to write. I want to be able to teach Isaac when he's older." "You will," Elias promised. "We'll learn together." As they talked about their hopes for the future, Sadie felt a peace she had never known before. For the first time in her life, she could see beyond tomorrow, beyond the constant struggle for survival. She could see a life worth living. But as the moon rose higher in the sky, a shadow fell across her heart. They weren't free yet. There were still many miles to travel, many dangers to face, and somewhere out there, William Harland was hunting them, determined to bring his son home and punish the slave girl who had dared to steal him away. They left the Quinn farm before dawn, traveling in a covered wagon with Thomas driving. Sadie, Elias, and Isaac were hidden beneath sacks of grain and farm tools, uncomfortable but well concealed. "Stay quiet no matter what happens," Thomas had instructed them. "Even if we're stopped, even if you hear voices, leave the talking to me." The journey was slow, the wagon bumping along rough country roads. Isaac, as if sensing the need for silence, barely made a sound, sleeping most of the time in Sadie's arms. Around midday, Thomas stopped the wagon. "River crossing ahead," he called back to them quietly. "There's usually a patrol here. Stay hidden." Sadie held her breath as the wagon rolled to a stop. She could hear voices, men talking, laughing, the sound of horses nearby. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Thomas called out in a friendly tone. "Fine day for traveling?" "Where you headed, old man?" a gruff voice responded. "Up to Millerville," Thomas replied easily. "Taking grain to the mill." "Mind if we take a look in your wagon? We're looking for runaways." Sadie felt Elias tense beside her. His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing it reassuringly. "Help yourself," Thomas said. "Though I'd appreciate if you don't disturb my load too much. Took me all morning to stack it just right." Footsteps approached the wagon. Sadie could see a sliver of light as someone pulled back the canvas cover. She held Isaac tighter, pressing her face into his small body to muffle her breathing. "Just grain," the man said after a moment, "and farm tools." "Told you," Thomas replied. "Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to get to the mill before sundown." "Hold on," another voice said. "What's that?" Sadie's heart nearly stopped. What had they seen? Had Isaac moved? Had they seen her hand? "What's what?" Thomas asked, sounding genuinely confused. "That bundle there under the sacks." "Oh, that's just my dinner and a change of clothes," Thomas explained. "My wife insists I take extra food whenever I make this trip. Says the food in town isn't fit for pigs, let alone Christian men." There was laughter from the patrol. "She's right about that. All right, old man, you can pass, but keep your eyes open. There's a big reward for anyone who spots these runaways we're after." "I'll be sure to do that," Thomas promised. The wagon lurched forward again, crossing what sounded like a wooden bridge. Only when they were well past the river did Thomas call back to them. "All clear," he said. "You can breathe again." Sadie realized she had been holding her breath for so long that her lungs ached. She exhaled shakily, feeling Elias do the same beside her. "That was too close," Elias whispered. "But we made it through," Sadie reminded him. "We're still heading north." They traveled until dusk, stopping only once more to water the horses and to allow Sadie to feed and change Isaac. As the sun began to set, Thomas guided the wagon off the main road and into a dense forest. "We're nearly there," he told them as they bumped along a narrow, overgrown path. "The next station is just ahead." The station turned out to be a small cabin deep in the woods, so well hidden that Sadie wouldn't have seen it if Thomas hadn't pointed it out. An elderly black man stood in the doorway, watching their approach with cautious eyes. "Moses," Thomas called out as they neared. "It's Thomas Quinn. I've brought friends." The old man nodded and stepped aside to let them enter. The cabin was small but neat, with a fireplace, a table, and 2 beds. "This is Moses Johnson," Thomas introduced them. "He'll guide you to the next station tomorrow night." Moses studied them in the dim light of the cabin. "Mighty dangerous times to be running," he commented, "especially with a baby." "We didn't have a choice," Elias replied. Moses grunted. "Nobody does. That's why we run." He turned to Thomas. "You staying the night?" Thomas shook his head. "Need to get back, but I'll be back in 2 weeks for the next group." After Thomas left, Moses served them a simple meal of cornbread and beans. As they ate, he told them about the next leg of their journey. "We'll travel by night. Stick to the woods," he explained. "It's 15 miles to the next station. If we're lucky, We can make it in one night. If not, we'll have to hide during the day and finish the journey the following night. Are there many patrols? Elias asked. More than usual, Moses admitted. Your father's offering a lot of money for your return. Word spreads fast when there's that kind of reward. Sadie glanced at Elias, seeing the guilt on his face. He blamed himself for the danger they were in. She, not you. But it wasn't his fault. None of this was his fault. We'll be careful, she said, as much to reassure Elias as to respond to Moses. Careful ain't always enough, Moses said gravely, but we'll do our best. That night they slept in shifts. Moses first, then Elias, while Sadie tended to Isaac. The baby seemed to sense the tension, fussing more than usual. Shh, little one, Sadie murmured, rocking him gently. We need to be quiet now. Elias watched him from across the cabin, his face soft in the dim light of the dying fire. He looks more like you every day, he observed. Sadie smiled down at her son. Do you think so? I see his father in him sometimes. Her smile faded as she remembered the overseer who had forced himself on her. I hope he doesn't grow up to be like him. He won't, Elias said firmly. He'll grow up with love, with kindness. He'll be a good man because you're a good mother. He ved to sit beside her. And because I'll teach him what it means to be a man, a real man, not the kind who hurts others. Sadie leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence. I believe you, she said softly. They set out the following night, Moses leading the way through the forest with the confidence of someone who had made the journey many times before. Sadie carried Isaac in the sling Martha had given her, while Elias carried a small pack with their meager supplies. The night was clear, the moon nearly full, providing enough light to see by, but also making them more visible to anyone who might be looking for them. Moses set a brisk pace, stopping only when absolutely necessary. We need to reach the river before dawn, he explained during one such stop. It's the most dangerous part of the journey. There's a ferry, but the ferryman is friendly to our cause. He'll take us across if we get there before his regular service begins. They pushed on, the forest growing thicker and more difficult to navigate. Sadie's legs ached, and her back, though much improved, still pained her with every step. But she didn't complain. She couldn't, not when freedom was so close yet still so far away. As the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, they reached the river. It was wider than Sadie had expected, the current swift and strong. There's the ferry, Moses whispered, pointing to a small dock where a flat-bottomed boat was tied up. A cabin stood nearby, smoke rising from its chimney. Wait here, I'll signal the ferryman. He moved cautiously toward the cabin, leaving Sadie and Elias hidden among the trees at the edge of the forest. Isaac had fallen asleep in his sling, his small face peaceful despite the danger surrounding them. Almost there, Elias murmured, putting his arm around Sadie. Just one more sea crossing, then we're that much closer to Ohio. Sadie nodded, too tired to speak. The journey had taken its toll on her, both physically and emotionally, but the thought of freedom, of a life with Elias and Isaac where they could be a real family, kept her going. Moses returned, his expression grim. There's a problem, he said quietly. The ferryman says there's a patrol watching the crossing. They arrived late last night asking questions about runaways. Do they know about us specifically? Elias asked. No, but they're checking everyone who crosses, and they have dogs. Sadie's heart sank. Dogs could pick up their scent easily, especially with a baby whose soiled cloths they had been discarding along the way. What do we do? She asked, trying to keep the despair from her voice. Moses looked at the river, then back at them. There's another crossing point about 5 miles upstream. No ferry, but the river's narrower there. We might be able to find a boat or build a raft. 5 miles, Elias repeated, glancing at Sadie with concern. Can you make it? Sadie straightened her shoulders. I can make it, she said firmly, though her body screamed in protest at the thought of another 5 miles of walking. They retreated into the forest, Moses now leading them parallel to the river. The going was tougher here, the undergrowth thicker, the ground rising and falling in steep ridges. By mid-morning, Sadie was stumbling with exhaustion. Isaac had woken and was crying steadily, hungry and uncomfortable. They stopped in a small clearing, and Sadie sank to the ground, her legs finally giving out. "I need to feed him," she said, already unfastening her dress. "I'll scout ahead," Moses said, giving them privacy. "See if I can find that crossing point." As Sadie nursed Isaac, Elias sat beside her, his own exhaustion evident in the slump of his shoulders, the dark circles under his eyes. "We'll rest for a bit," he said, "just until Isaac is fed and changed." Sadie nodded gratefully. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a while, the only sound Isaac's contented nursing. Sadie allowed her eyes to close just for a moment, the weight of exhaustion pulling her towards sleep. The sound of barking in the distance snapped her awake. "Dogs," Elias said, already on his feet. "They must have picked up our trail." Panic surged through Sadie. "Where's Moses?" "Still scouting ahead," Elias replied, helping her to her feet. "We need to move now." Sadie quickly fastened her dress, adjusting Isaac in his sling. The baby, startled by their sudden movement, began to cry again. "Shh, little one," Sadie pleaded, trying to soothe him as they hurried through the forest. The barking grew louder, more excited. The dogs had definitely caught their scent and were closing in. "This way," Elias urged, pulling Sadie toward the river. "We need to get to the water. It might throw the dogs off our scent." They crashed through the undergrowth, branches scratching at their faces and arms. Isaac's cries grew louder, frightened by the noise and movement. The trees suddenly thinned and they found themselves at the riverbank. The water rushed by, dark and fast. "Where's Moses?" Sadie asked, scanning the shoreline frantically. "I don't know," Elias admitted. "But we can't wait for him. Those dogs are getting closer." He looked upstream and downstream, trying to decide which way to go. The barking was very close now, accompanied by men's voices shouting to each other. "There!" Elias pointed to something in the water a short distance downstream, a small rowboat tied to a fallen tree. They scrambled along the rocky shoreline, Sadie struggling to keep her footing while holding Isaac securely. The boat was old and weathered, but it looked sound enough to carry them across the river. Elias quickly untied it, checking that the oars were inside. "Get in," he told Sadie, holding the boat steady against the current. Sadie climbed in carefully, settling in the middle with Isaac. Elias pushed the boat away from the shore, jumping in as it began to drift with the current. "Hold on," he said, grabbing the oars and beginning to row. The current was strong, pulling them downstream even as Elias fought to cross to the other side. The barking reek hid the shore they had just left. Through the trees, Sadie could see men with dogs pointing and shouting when they spotted the boat on the river. "They've seen us," she cried. Elias rowed harder, his muscles straining with the effort. The boat moved painfully slowly across the rushing water. A shot rang out, the bullet hitting the water near the boat. Then another, splintering wood at the bow. "Get down!" Elias shouted, still rowing desperately. Sadie Kerr led around Isaac, trying to make herself as small a target as possible. The baby was screaming now, terrified by the noise and commotion. More shots followed, but they were moving out of range as the current carried them farther downstream. Elias continued to row, aiming for the opposite shore where the forest grew right down to the water's edge. "We're going to make it," he panted, his face shining with sweat from the exertion. "Just a little farther." Thef E-boat scraped against the rocky bottom, and then they were at the shore. Elias jumped out, pulling the boat up onto the bank. He helped Sadie out, both of them stumbling with exhaustion and relief. "Into the trees," Elias urged. "They might try to cross and follow us." They hurried into the forest, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the river. Isaac had finally stopped crying, perhaps sensing that the immediate danger had passed. After about half a mile, Sadie couldn't go any farther. "I need to rest," she gasped, sinking to the ground beneath a large oak tree. Elias looked back the way they had come, listening for any sound of pursuit. All was quiet except for the distant rush of the river and the normal sounds of the forest. "I think we lost them," he said, sitting down beside her. "For now, at least." "What about Moses?" Sadie asked, worried about the old man who had risked so many to help them. "He knows these woods better than anyone," Elias reassured her. "If anyone can evade the patrols, it's him." They rested for a while, sharing the last of their water and a small piece of bread. Isaac, exhausted from the ordeal, fell into a deep sleep in Sadie's arms. "What now?" Sadie asked eventually. "We don't know where the next station is." Elias pulled out the rough map Thomas had given him. "According to this, we need to keep heading G north. There should be a town about 10 miles from here. Thomas said there's a church there with a white steeple. The minister is part of the Underground Railroad." 10 miles, Sadie repeated, the distance seeming almost impossible in her exhausted state. "We'll take it slow," Elias promised. "Rest when we need to. We have a little food left and I can find water along the way." They set out again as the sun began its descent, moving cautiously through the unfamiliar forest. Without Moses to guide them, they had to rely on Elias's limited knowledge of reading the map and navigating by the sun. Night fell, making travel even more difficult. They stopped more frequently now, both to rest and to check their direction by the stars. Elias had learned a little about navigation from books in his father's library, knowledge that now proved invaluable. "The North Star," he explained, pointing to a bright star in the night sky. "As long as we keep that in front of us, we're heading in the right direction." They walked through the night, taking turns carrying Isaac when Sadie's strength began to flag. By dawn they had covered perhaps 5 miles, half the distance to the town. "We should rest during the day," Elias suggested, as they found a small hollow sheltered by bushes. "Travel again at night. It's safer." Sadie nodded, too exhausted to argue. She lay down on the soft forest floor, Isaac nestled against her chest. Elias stretched out beside them, his body forming a protective barrier between his family and the outside world. Despite their precarious situation, Sadie felt a strange sense of peace as she drifted toward sleep. They were still together, still heading north, still alive and free, at least for now. They reached the town the following night, approaching cautiously from the cover of the surrounding forest. The white steeple of the church was visible in the moonlight, a beacon of hope. "How do we know it's safe?" Sadie whispered, as they watched the quiet streets from the edge of the trees. "We don't," Elias admitted, "but we have no choice. We need help to continue our journey." They waited until the town was completely still, most of its residents asleep in their beds. Then, staying in the shadows, they made their way to the church. A small house stood beside it, the minister's residence, Elias guessed. He knocked softly on the door, his heart pounding with fear and hope. After a moment, a light appeared in the window, and the door opened a crack. An elderly white man with kind eyes peered out at them. "Yes?" he asked cautiously. "Thomas Quinn sent us," Elias said, using the phrase Thomas had told him would identify them as runaways seeking help. The minister's eyes widened slightly, then he opened the door wider. "Come in quickly," he urged. "It's not safe to stand outside." They entered a small, comfortable sitting room. A woman, the minister's wife presumably, stood in a doorway, a candle in her hand. "Mary, these are the ones Thomas told us about," the minister explained. "They need our help." The woman nodded, her face softening as she saw Isaac sleeping in Sadie's arms. "The poor dears look exhausted," she said. "Come, I'll show you where you can rest." She led them to a hidden door behind a bookcase, which opened to reveal a small room with a bed, a table, and a few chairs. "You'll be safe here," she assured them. "No one knows about this room except us and those we help." Sadie sank onto the bed, relief flooding through her. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome, child," Mary replied kindly. "Now let me get you something to eat, and then you can rest." Over a simple meal of bread, cheese, and tea, they told the minister, Reverend John Davis, about their journey so far, including the separation from Moses at the river. "Moses is resourceful," Reverend Davis reassured them. "He's been doing this work for many years. I'm sure he'll find his way back to safety." "How much farther to Ohio?" Elias asked. "About 100 miles, the Reverend replied. "But you won't have to make the journey all at once. There are stations every 20 miles or so along the route." "And once we reach Ohio," Sadie asked, "will we truly be free?" The Reverend's face grew serious. "In theory, yes. Ohio is a free state. But the fugitive slave law means that slave catchers can pursue you even there. You'll need to be careful, stay among friends who will protect you." "We will," Elias promised. "We've come too far to be caught now." They rested at the Reverend's house for 2 days, regaining their strength and preparing for the next leg of their journey. Mary took a special interest in Isaac, providing clean clothes for him and teaching Sadie how to ease his teething pain with a cloth soaked in cold water. On the evening of the third day, Reverend Davis came to their hidden room with news. "I've arranged for a farmer who delivers goods to the next town to take you with him," he explained. "You'll hide in his wagon under sacks of grain, just as you did with Thomas. He'll take you to the next station, a farm owned by Quakers about 20 miles north of here." "When do we leave?" Elias asked. "Tomorrow morning before dawn," the Reverend replied. "The journey should take most of the day." That night, as they prepared for the next stage of their journey, Sadie found herself thinking of the Harland plantation. It seemed a lifetime ago that she had hidden Isaac in the barn, that Elias had discovered them there. So much had happened since then, so much danger, so much fear, but also so much love and kindness from strangers willing to risk everything to help them. "What are you thinking about?" Elias asked, noticing her pensive expression. "Everything," Sadie replied. "How far we've come, how far we still have to go." "We're going to make it," Elias said with conviction. "I can feel it." Sadie wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. "Your father won't give up easily," she reminded him. "No," Elias agreed, "but neither will we." The journey continued much as before, hiding in wagons, traveling by night, relying on the kindness of strangers who were part of the Underground Railroad. Each station brought them closer to Ohio, closer to freedom. At one farm, they heard news that chilled their blood. William Harland had personally led a party of slave catchers across 3 states, offering increasingly large rewards for information about his So-En and the stolen property he had taken with him. "He's in Kentucky now," their host told them, "just 2 states away, and he's hired professional slave catchers with bloodhounds." Elias's face hardened at this news. "We need to move faster," he said. "My father won't stop until he finds us." They pushed on, taking greater risks now, traveling even when it might have been safer to rest. Isaac, growing stronger every day, seemed to understand the need for quiet, rarely crying except when hungry or uncomfortable. 10 days after leaving Reverend Davis's church, they reached the Ohio River, the border between slave territory and free states. Their guide, a young black man named Samuel who had been born free in Ohio, brought them to a secluded spot where a small boat was hidden among the reeds. "This is as far as I go," he told them. "Once you cross that river, you're in Ohio. Head north until you reach a town called Ripley. There's a house on a hill overlooking the river. That's the home of John Rankin. He'll help you from there." Sadie looked at the river, wide and dark in the moonlight. Beyond it lay Ohio. Freedom. A new life. "Thank you," she said to Samuel, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." "Just keep heading north," Samuel replied with a smile. "And someday, when all this is over, remember those who are still in chains." "We will," Elias promised Dee solemnly. "Always." They climbed into the small boat, Elias taking the oars while Sadie settled in the middle with Isaac. The current was strong but not as fierce as the river they had crossed during their escape from the patrol. Samuel pushed them off from the shore, waving once before disappearing back into the trees. Elias rowed steadily, his strokes powerful and determined. Sadie watched the Kentucky shore recede behind them, hardly daring to believe that they were so close to freedom. The crossing took less than half an hour. When the boat scraped against the Ohio shore, Sadie let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We made it," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "We're in Ohio." Elias helped her out of the boat, then lifted Isaac from her arms, holding him high. "You're in a free state now, son," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You're free." They pulled the boat up onto the shore, hiding it among the reeds as Samuel had instructed. Then, following his directions, they began to walk north toward the town of Ripley and the house on the hill. The night was clear and warm, the stars bright overhead. Sadie walked beside Elias, their steps lighter now despite their exhaustion. Every mile they put between themselves and the river was another mile toward safety. As dawn broke, they saw the town in the distance, and on a hill overlooking the river a large white house just as Samuel had described. They approached cautiously, still wary despite being in a free state. A man was working in the garden as they neared the house. He looked up as they approached, his eyes taking in their travel-worn appearance, the baby in Sadie's arms, the mixture of fear and hope on their faces. "You've come a long way," he said simply. "Welcome to Ohio." "Are you John Rankin?" Elias asked. The man nodded. "I am. And you must be the family Samuel told me to expect." "Yes," Elias confirmed. "I'm Elias. This is Sadie and our son, Isaac." If Rankin was surprised by a white man claiming a black woman and child as family, he didn't show it. "Come inside," he said. "You look like you could use some rest and a good meal." The Rankin house was large and comfortable, with many rooms to accommodate the runaways who passed through on their journey north. John's wife, John, welcomed them warmly, immediately taking a liking to Isaac. "Such a beautiful child," she cooed, bouncing him on her knee, "and so good-natured after such a journey." "He's a brave little soul," Sadie agreed, watching her son with pride. "Like his father." She glanced at Elias as she said this, and he smiled, understanding her meaning. Whatever Isaac's biological origins, Elias was his father in all the ways that mattered. Over dinner, John Rankin explained what would happen next. "You're in a free state now," he told them, "but that doesn't mean you're completely safe. The fugitive slave law allows slave catchers to pursue runaways even in free states. And given the size of the reward your father is offering, Elias, there will be many willing to turn you in." "What do you suggest?" Elias asked. "Continue north," Rankin advised. "To Canada, if possible. The British don't recognize American slave laws. Once you cross that border, you'll truly be beyond reach." "Canada," Sadie repeated, the word both exciting and intimidating. A foreign country, even farther from everything she had ever known. "It's a good place," Rankin assured her. "There are communities of former slaves there living freely. You could build a life there without fear." "Then that's where we'll go," Elias decided. "How far is it?" "About 300 miles, Rankin replied. "But as before, you won't have to make the journey all at once. There are stations along the way, people who will help you." They stayed with the Rankins for a week, resting and preparing for the final leg of their journey. Sadie's back, which had never fully healed from the lashing, was treated by a doctor who was sympathetic to the abolitionist cause. Elias helped John with work around the farm while Sadie assisted John in the kitchen, learning to cook dishes she had never prepared before. Isaac thrived in the peaceful environment, growing stronger and more alert each day. He was beginning to sit up on his own now, reaching for things with curious hands, laughing when Elias made funny faces at him. "He's going to be a smart one," Jean observed one afternoon as she watched Sadie playing with him. "You can see it in his eyes." "I want him to have an education," Sadie essayed. "To learn to read and write, to have opportunities I never had." "He will," Jean assured her. "In Canada, there are schools for children like him, and for you too if you want to learn." The idea of going to school herself had never occurred to Sadie. "Me? But I'm too old." "Nonsense," Jean said firmly. "It's never too late to learn. My husband teaches adults to read all the time." Hope bloomed in Sadie's chest, hope for herself, not just for Isaac. A future where she could read books, write letters, perhaps even have a trade of her own. As they prepared to leave for the next station, John Rankin brought them news that made their departure more urgent. "Word has reached me that William Harland has crossed into Ohio," he told them gravely. "He has a large party with him, including professional slave catchers with dogs. They're searching every town along the river." Elias's face darkened at the news. "My father is nothing if not persistent," he said bitterly. "Even now he can't accept that I've chosen my own path." "It's not just about you," Rankin pointed out gently. In his mind, Sadie and Isaac are his property, valuable property that you've stolen. "They're not property," Elias said fiercely. "They're people, my family." "I know that," Rankin assured him, "but your father doesn't see it that way, and the law, unfortunately, is on his side, even here in Ohio." They left that night, traveling in a closed carriage with a false bottom where they could hide if necessary. Their driver was a young Quaker man named David, who had been helping runaways since he was a boy. "My father did this work before me," he told them as they traveled through the night, and his father before him. It's a family tradition, you might say. The journey through Ohio was less dangerous than their earlier travels, but still far from safe. They moved from station to station, sometimes staying for just a night, other times for several days when danger was particularly close. At one farm, they narrowly escaped a search party led by William Harland himself. Hidden in a root cellar beneath the barn, they listened as horses and men moved around above them. Isaac, as if sensing the danger, remained perfectly silent in Sadie's arms. "That's them, all right," they heard William Harland's voice, so close it made Elias flinch. "A white man, a black woman, and a baby. Seen them pass through here 2 days ago." "No, sir," the farmer replied calmly. "I haven't seen anyone matching that description." "You're lying," Harland accused. "All you abolitionists are the same, thinking you know better than the law." "The law of man, perhaps," the farmer responded, "but not the law of God, which tells us all men are created equal." There was the sound of a scuffle, then the farmer's wife calling out in alarm. But eventually the search party left, convinced that their quarry had moved on. When it was safe, they emerged from the cellar to find the farmer with a bruised face, but a determined spirit. "They're heading west," he told them. "We've sent false information through our network. With luck, they'll be searching in the wrong direction while you continue north." "I'm sorry for what my father did to you," Elias said, his face filled with shame. "Don't apologize for him," the farmer said firmly. "You're not responsible for his actions, only your own, and your actions speak well of you." They pushed on, the miles to Canada growing fewer with each passing day. Sadie found herself daring to believe that they might actually make it, that freedom, real freedom, was within their grasp. And then, just 2 days from the Canadian border, disaster struck. They were traveling by night as usual, moving through a dense forest with their guide, a free black man named Joshua, who knew the route well. Suddenly, the baying of hounds broke the stillness of the night. "Slave catchers," Joshua hissed, coming to an abrupt halt, "and they're close." Elias and Sadie exchanged a look of pure fear. After coming so far, after overcoming so many obstacles, would they be caught now so close to their goal? "There's a stream ahead, Josh," Yue said quickly. "If we can reach it, we might be able to throw the dogs off our scent." They ran, Joshua leading the way while Elias helped Sadie, who was carrying Isaac. The baby, startled awake by the sudden movement, began to cry. "Shh, little one," Sadie pleaded, trying to soothe him while running for their lives. "Please, be quiet." But Isaac's cries grew louder, and the barking of the hounds grew closer. They were being hunted, and their pursuers were gaining on them. The trees suddenly thinned, and they found themselves at the edge of a wide stream, the water swift and dark in the moonlight. "Cross here," Joshua instructed, already wading in. "The water's not too deep, but it's cold. Be careful." Sadie hesitated, looking down at Isaac. The baby was still crying, his face red with the effort. "I can't risk him in that water," she said. "He's too small." "We don't have a choice," Elias said grimly. "If we stay here, they'll catch us." The barking was very close now. They could hear men's voices calling to each other as they followed the dogs through the forest. "Go," Sadie said suddenly, thrusting Isaac into Elias's arms. "Take him and go. I'll lead them away." "What? No," Elias protested. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to," Sadie insisted. "For Isaac. He needs a father. He needs freedom. I can lead them away, give you time to cross." "No," Elias said firmly. "We stay together. That's what we promised." Before Sadie could argue further, Joshua returned to them, his face grim but determined. "I have an idea," he said quickly. "Give me your coat, Elias. And Sadie, I need the scarf you've been using to carry Isaac." They handed over the items, confused but trusting him. Joshua took them and ran a short distance away into the trees on their right. "What's he doing?" Sadie whispered. "Creating a false TRL," Elias realized, "to draw the dogs away." Minutes later, Joshua returned, soaking wet from the stream. "I've laid a false trail heading east," he explained. "It should buy us some time. Now we need to cross the stream and continue north. Stay in the water as long as you can." They waded into the stream, the cold water shocking after the warmth of the summer night. Isaac whimpered but didn't cry out, as if he too understood the need for quiet. Elias C. arrayed him high against his chest, keeping him dry. They moved downstream for nearly half a mile before finally leaving the water on the opposite bank. By then, the sounds of pursuit had faded, the dogs and men following the false trail Joshua had laid. "It worked," Sadie breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "For now," Joshua cautioned. "But we need to keep moving. The next station is only 5 miles from here. If we hurry, we can reach it before dawn." They pushed on through the night, their wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to their skin. Isaac, exhausted by the excitement, fell asleep in Elias's arms, his small face peaceful despite the danger surrounding them. The next station turned out to be a small farmhouse owned by an elderly Quaker couple. The woman, Martha, took one look at their bedraggled state and immediately set about providing dry clothes and hot food. "You poor dears," she clucked, taking Isaac from Elias and wrapping him in a warm blanket. "Such a journey for one so small." "He's stronger than he looks," Sadie said proudly. "Just like his mother," Elias added, his eyes full of love as he looked at Sadie. They rested at the farm for a day, regaining their strength for the final leg of their journey. The Canadian border was less than 40 miles away now, so close they could almost taste freedom. Joshua, who had been conferring with their HOSts, brought them a map. "This is the route we'll take," he explained, tracing a line with his finger. "There's one more station between here and the border, about 20 miles north. We'll rest there, then make the final push to Canada." "What about the slave catchers?" Elias asked. "Will they still be looking for us?" "Undoubtedly," Joshua replied grimly. "But our network has been spreading false information about your whereabouts. With luck, they'll be searching in the wrong places while we slip across the border." They set out the following night, moving with the caution of those who have nearly been caught too many times. The terrain was flatter here, making travel easier, but also leaving them more exposed. They stuck to the woods whenever possible, avoiding roads and open fields. By dawn, they had covered nearly 15 miles. They rested during the day in a small cave Joshua knew about, eating the food Martha had packed for them and taking turns keeping watch. As Sadie nursed Isaac, she found herself thinking about the future, their future in Canada. What would it be like to live as free people? To walk down a street without fear? To have Isaac grow up never knowing the lash or the auction block? "What are you thinking about?" Elias asked, noticing her pensive expression. "Canada," Sadie replied. "What our life will be like there." Elias smiled, his face lighting up with hope. "We'll have a home of our own," he said. "A small house maybe, with a garden for you and Isaac to play in. I'll learn a trade, carpentry perhaps, and you can learn to read and write just like you wanted." "And Isaac," Sadie prompted, wanting to hear more of this beautiful future. "Isaac will go to school," Elias continued. "He'll learn everything, reading, writing, arithmetic, history, science, whatever he wants to study. And when he's grown, he can be anything he chooses. A doctor, a lawyer, a teacher." "A free man," Sadie added softly. "Yes," Elias agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "A free man. Like his father should have been. Like all men should be." They reached the final station that night, a church in a small town just 20 miles from the Canadian border. The minister, a fierce abolitionist named Reverend Thomas, welcomed them warmly. "You've come at a good time," he told them over a late supper in the church basement. "I have a wagon leaving for the border tomorrow night, carrying supplies to our sister church in Canada. You can hide among the cargo." "Is it safe?" Joshua asked. "As safe as anything can be these days," Reverend Thomas replied. "The driver is experienced, and the border guards know him well. They rarely check his wagon thoroughly." "What about William Harland?" Elias asked. "Have you heard any news of him?" The Reverend's face grew serious. "He was in a town about 30 miles west of here yesterday, offering an even larger reward for your capture. $20,000 now," Sadie gasped. It was an unimaginable sum. "He's not giving up," Elias said grimly. "No," the Reverend agreed, "but he's looking in the wrong place, and by tomorrow night you'll be beyond his reach." They spent the day resting in the church basement, preparing for the final leg of their journey. Sadie bathed Isaac in a small tub of warm water, marveling at how much he had grown since they left the Harlan plantation. He was sitting up strongly now, babbling happily, reaching for her face with curious hands. "You're going to be free," she whispered to him. "Truly free. No one will ever own you. No one will ever sell you away from your family." Elias watched them from across the room, his heart full of love for this woman and child who had become his world. Everything he had given up, his home, his inheritance, his position in society, seemed a small price to pay for the family he had gained. As evening approached, Reverend Thomas came to them with unexpected news. "There's a change of plans," he said urgently. "William Harland has been seen in town, asking questions at the hotel. Someone must have tipped him off that you might be passing through here." Fear clutched at Sadie's heart. "Does he know we're here, at the church?" "I don't think so," the Reverend replied. "But we can't risk waiting for the wagon tomorrow. You need to leave tonight on foot." "But the border is still 20 miles away," Elias pointed out. "Can we make it on foot before Harland finds us?" "You'll have to," the Reverend said grimly. "I've sent word ahead to our contacts on the Canadian side. They'll meet you at the crossing point, a small ferry across the Niagara River. The ferryman is one of us. He'll take you across to freedom." They left as soon as darkness fell, Reverend Thomas accompanying them to the edge of town to make sure the way was clear. Joshua, who had guided them this far, would continue with them to the border. "God be with you," the Reverend said as they prepared to part ways. "You're carrying precious cargo, not just a child, but hope for a better world." They set out into the night, moving as quickly and quietly as possible. The road to the border was relatively straightforward, but they stayed off it, traveling instead through fields and woods parallel to the main route. The night was clear, the stars bright overhead. Sadie carried Isaac, who slept peacefully despite the movement. Elias walked beside her, one hand holding hers, the other ready on the pistol he had carried since their first escape. They had covered perhaps 10 miles when they heard the sound of horses on the road nearby. Instantly they froze, dropping to the ground in the tall grass of the field they were crossing. "Stay down," Joshua whispered. "Don't make a sound." Through gaps in the grass they could see riders passing on the road, at least 6 men with dogs on leashes. At the front, illuminated by the moonlight, was a figure Elias recognized immediately. William Harland. His father looked older than when Elias had last seen him, his face harder, more lined. There was a coldness in his expression that Elias had always known was there, but had never fully acknowledged until he had seen the man's cruelty through Sadie's eyes. "They're heading for the border," one of the men with Harland was saying. "If we push hard, we can reach the crossing before them." "I want them found," William Harland replied, his voice carrying clearly in the still night air. "Especially my son, the woman and the baby." He paused. "Do what you must, but Elias comes back alive." Sadie felt Elias tense beside her, his hand tightening on hers. She knew what he was thinking, that even now, after everything, his father saw him only as property to be retrieved, not as a man making his own choices, not as a father protecting his family. The riders passed, continuing down the road toward the border. When they were out of sight, Joshua motioned for them to stay pew. "Tell we need to change our route," he whispered. "They're heading for the main crossing point. We'll have to find another way." "Is there another way?" Sadie asked, fear making her voice shake. Joshua nodded. "There's a smaller crossing point a few miles east of the main one. It's more dangerous. The river is wider there with stronger currents, but there's less likely to be anyone watching for us." "Then that's where we'll go," Elias decided. They changed direction, moving east through the fields, staying well away from the road. The going was slower now, the terrain more difficult. Isaac woke and began to fuss, hungry and uncomfortable. "We need to stop," Sadie said eventually, "just for a few minutes. I need to feed him." They found shelter in a small copse of trees. While Sadie nursed Isaac, Elias and Joshua discussed their new route. "We're still about 8 miles from the river," Joshua estimated. "If WE keep this pace, we can reach it by dawn." "And then?" Elias asked. "Then we find a boat," Joshua replied. "Cross the river. On the other side is Canada. Freedom." They continued through the night, exhaustion making every step an effort of will. Sadie's arms ached from carrying Isaac, but she refused Elias's offers to take him. She needed to hold her son, to feel his weight in her arms, to know that he was safe. As the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, they reached the river. The Niagara stretched before them, wide and powerful, the water dark and swirling. On the opposite shore, so close yet still unreachable, was Canada. "Now we need to find a boat," Joshua said, scanning the shoreline. They moved along the riverbank, staying under the cover of trees, searching for anything that could carry them across. Finally, they spotted it. A small rowboat pulled up on the shore, half hidden among reeds. "There," Elias pointed. "That's our way across." As they approached the boat, a figure emerged from the trees nearby, an elderly black man with white hair and kind eyes. "You looking to cross?" he asked quietly. They tensed, ready to run, but Joshua stepped forward. "Thomas Quinn sent us," he said, using the phrase that identified them as part of the Underground Railroad. The old man nodded. "I've been waiting for you. My name is Moses. I'm the ferryman here." Relief washed over them. This was no trap, but another link in the chain of helpers that had brought them this far. "William Harland and his men are watching the main crossing," Joshua told Moses. "We had to change our route." "I know," Moses replied. "Word reached me last night. That's why I came here instead." He gestured to the boat. "This will take you across. The current is strong, but I know how to navigate it." They helped load their few possessions into the boat. As Joshua prepared to step in, Moses stopped him. "Not you," he said gently. "You need to go back. Continue the work. There are others who need your help." Joshua looked torn, but finally nodded. "You're right." He turned to Elias and Sadie. "This is where we part ways." Sadie felt tears fill her eye. Joshua had risked so much to help them, had guided them safely through countless dangers. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "for everything." "Take care of that little one," Joshua replied, touching Isaac's cheek gently. "And remember those still in chains." "We will," Elias promised, clasping Joshua's hand firmly. "Always." With final goodbyes said, Elias helped Sadie into the boat, then climbed in himself. Moses pushed off from the shore, using a long pole to guide them into the current. As they moved away from the American shore, Sadie looked back. Joshua stood watching them, a solitary figure silhouetted against the rising sun. Then he turned and disappeared into the trees, heading back to continue his dangerous but vital work. The crossing was difficult, the current stronger than they had anticipated. Moses struggled with the pole, his aged arms straining with the effort. Elias T. Ook, one of the oars, helping to steer the small craft toward the Canadian shore. Halfway across, disaster struck. A shout from the American shore caught their attention. Looking back, they saw riders, William Harland and his men, having somehow discovered their change of plans. "Row harder," Moses urged, his voice tight with urgency. "We're almost there." Elias pulled on the oar with all his strength, his muscles burning with the effort. The Canadian shore was tantalizingly close now, perhaps 100 yards away. A shot rang out, the bullet hitting the water near the boat, then another splintering wood at the edge of the craft. "Get down!" Elias shouted, pushing Sadie and Isaac to the bottom of the boat. Moses kept poling, his face set with determination. Another shot and he staggered, clutching his arm where blood suddenly appeared. "Moses!" Sadie cried in alarm. "I'm all right," the old man gasped. "Thou—" Clearly he was not. "Keep going, we're almost there." More shots followed, but they were moving out of range now, the distance to the American shore increasing with every moment. And then, suddenly, the boat bumped against something solid, the Canadian shore. Elias jumped out, pulling the boat up onto the bank. He helped Sadie out, then turned to assist Moses, who was now pale with pain and blood loss. "We made it," the old man whispered, a smile breaking across his face despite his injury. "You're in Canada now, you're free." On the American shore, William Harland and his men had reached the water's edge. They stood watching, unable to follow, as their quarry escaped beyond their reach. Elias stared across the water at his father, their eyes meeting one final time. In that moment, something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, that some bonds were stronger than blood. That love, not ownership, was what truly made a family. Then Elias turned away, putting his arm around Sadie and looking down at Isaac in her arms. "We're free," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Truly free." Sadie looked up at him, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Free." Epilogue. 5 years later, a small house stood on the outskirts of a Canadian town. It was a modest dwelling, painted white with green shutters, surrounded by a garden where summer flowers bloomed in riotous color. On the porch, a woman sat in a rocking chair reading aloud from a book. She was in her late 20s now, her face more mature but still beautiful, her eyes filled with a contentment that came from security and love. "And then what happened, Mama?" asked the boy sitting at her feet. At 5 years old, Isaac was tall for his age, with intelligent eyes and a curious mind. "Then the prince saved the princess," Sadie continued, her finger tracing the words on the page. She had learned to read just as she had dreamed, attending classes at the local church, along with other former slaves who had found freedom in Canada. "Did they live happily ever after?" Isaac asked, already knowing the answer but wanting to hear it again. "Yes, they did," Sadie replied with a smile. "Just like us." The sound of a wagon approaching made them both look up. A man was driving down the lane toward the townhouse, waving when he saw them on the porch. "Papa's home!" Isaac cried, jumping up and running to meet the wagon. Elias stepped down, catching his son in a hug that lifted the boy high in the air. "Have you been good for your mother today?" he asked, setting Isaac back on his feet. "Yes, sir," Isaac replied proudly. "I helped with the garden and practiced my letters." "Good boy," Elias said, ruffling his hair. He walked up to the porch, leaning down to kiss Sadie. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, his hand gently touching her rounded belly. "Better," Sadie replied. "The baby was quiet this morning." Elias sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "The shop is doing well," he told her. "Mr. Johnson asked me to make another cabinet for his wife. Says the last one was the finest piece of furniture he's ever owned." Elias had indeed learned carpentry, as he had planned. His workshop in town was small, but successful, known for quality work and fair prices. They lived modestly but comfortably, wanting for nothing essential. More importantly, they lived freely. Isaac attended the local school, learning alongside white children without distinction or discrimination. Sadie had friends in the community, other women, both black and white, who visited for tea and conversation. Elias served on the town council, his voice respected in community matters. And I had not forgotten their promise to remember those still in chains. Their home was a station on a different underground railroad now, one that helped newly arrived fugitives adjust to freedom, find work, learn to read and write. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over their little home, Sadie looked at her husband and son. From the barn, where she had hidden her newborn in fear, to this porch where they sat in safety and love, it had been a long journey, a dangerous one that had cost good people their lives. But as Isaac laughed at something Elias said, his face alight with the simple joy of being with his father, Sadie knew it had been worth every step. They were free, they were family, and the child she had once hidden from the world now lived proudly in the light. The end.